You ever walk past someone and feel like you just missed something important? Like you saw the cover of a book that had too many pages to be that quiet. That was Ellis Brooks, old man with a broom in his hand and too much silence in his eyes. He didn't speak much, never raised his voice, just nodded when students passed, kept to his corner, and moved through the marble halls of that law school like a ghost that nobody wanted to know. But there was something in the way he moved, something that didn't match the name tag clipped to his shirt. You could see it. If you paid attention, most didn't. This is Mark Schwa, and you're watching Injustice Browning. If this story pulls something out of you, pain, anger, truth, hit that subscribe button. Share it. Comment your thoughts. Because silence only helps the ones who built the system to keep people like Ellis invisible. Now back to him. Ellis had been working at that Southern law school longer than most professors had been alive. He came in early, left late, mopped floors that students tracked dirt across without even noticing him. But he never looked like a man who was broken, just tucked away, like someone had filed him under Do Not Disturb. The students called him Mr. B, or just nodded, like people do when they feel guilty for not knowing your name. Most of them barely noticed he was there, but one kid, Jamal, he looked longer, not out of pity, out of confusion. Jamal was in his first year, smart, sharp, angry, but learning how to hide it. He'd catch Ellis standing still sometimes, just staring up at the portraits along the history wing. Big frames, old faces, civil rights lawyers, judges, movements painted in strokes of pain and pride. Jamal once saw Ellis staring at one photo for so long he thought maybe the man had fallen asleep. But he hadn't. He was looking at it like it owed him something. It wasn't just the way Ellis stared. It was the way he spoke, when he rarely did. Clean words, full sentences, old school diction. Like someone who used to be respected, not a janitor, more like the scholar, a man who'd known better days, but never bragged about them. One day, Jamal held the door open and said, "Thank you, sir." Ellis paused, not like he didn't hear it, but like it surprised him. Like it had been years since anyone said sir without mocking him. He nodded, quiet. "You're welcome, son." That's when Jamal started paying attention. He saw Ellis reading a Supreme Court opinion printout in the break room once, not the news article, the full opinion, and not skimming either, annotating it, underlining clauses like it was second nature. Jamal blinked, thought maybe he was mistaken, but no. Ellis flipped the page with the kind of care you only see from people who live in books. Then there was the time. He heard Ellis correcting someone softly from behind a mop bucket. A second year student was ranting about a trial verdict. Got a detail wrong. Said the prosecutor had made a motion that didn't even exist. Ellis, without even raising his eyes, just said, "They filed a Rule 29, not a 60. Wouldn't make sense otherwise." The student laughed it off. Thought maybe Ellis had overheard it on a podcast or something, but Jamal knew better. This man was hiding something, not because he wanted to, but because the world had already told him he didn't matter. Jamal started walking with Ellis sometimes, just a few steps, no real questions. He didn't push, he just showed up, helped take the trash out once, sat with him on the steps one night, eating vending machine snacks, talked about nothing. But Ellis, he'd say things, random things that didn't match the life he looked like he lived. Like the time he quoted Thurgood Marshall word for word without even blinking, or when he mentioned arguing against a judge who wore his hatred like a uniform. Jamal froze. That wasn't janitor talk. Something didn't line up. Who was this man? Why did he clean the halls of a school he sounded like he should be teaching at? Why did the world forget about Ellis Brooks? Or worse, what did it do to him? The truth was buried. But Jamal had just started digging. Back then, they called him E.J. Ellis James Brooks. Young, sharp, clean cut. A 25-year-old brother with a mind like a scalpel and a suit that never wrinkled. The kind of man who looked every inch like the future they told us to believe in until he became a threat. It was 1967. The South was boiling. Streets still smelled like tear gas. Malcolm was already gone. Dr. King was being watched by the FBI. And Ellis? He was walking into rooms where no black man had ever been allowed to stand before, and making people nervous just by being better than them. He was the first black editor of the Law Review at Middleton College of Law, a place built on old money and older rules. You didn't walk those halls unless your family had a name engraved on a courthouse. Ellis didn't. He came from Birmingham, Steeltown, working class, raised by a father who fixed machines and a mother who fixed everything else. Ellis didn't smile much, didn't party, didn't smoke. He read, he wrote, he studied. He carried himself with a calmness that made loud men uncomfortable. People used to say he was too serious, but Ellis knew better. He knew that being brilliant wasn't enough. You had to be flawless. One mistake, and they'd bury you, and they did. The night it happened was quiet, early spring. Ellis had just finished helping a white classmate review for her constitutional law midterm. Her name was Sarah Winslow, senator's daughter, soft-voiced, called Ellis EJ. Like they were old friends. She'd asked for help. He said yes. That was all it took. The next morning, campus police came knocking, said Sarah had accused him of assault. No injuries, no witnesses, just her word, and in the Jim Crow South. That was all they needed. Ellis didn't run, didn't hide. He believed, maybe foolishly, that the law would protect him. He walked into that station with a suit and his student ID. By nightfall, they had him in chains. The trial wasn't justice. It was a ritual, a warning. The prosecutor called him aggressive, calculated, arrogant. A law student with ambition suddenly became a predator in the eyes of 12 white jurors. They paraded Sarah onto the stand like a wounded flower, said her tears proved everything. Ellis's calm proved nothing. He told the truth, swore on everything. He knew, said nothing happened. Didn't matter. They never even let him call character witnesses. His professors stayed silent. Friends disappeared. One told him, "You should have known better." That was all. The verdict came fast. Guilty, assault, attempted rape, 15 years, gone, just like that. And that law review title, stripped. His academic record, sealed. His dreams, crushed. Under the gavel before he even had a chance to breathe. When Ellis walked into prison, he didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just kept his back straight. He was never allowed to touch a book in his first year inside. That was policy keep. The smart ones away from anything that might remind them who they were. He read case law off smuggled scraps of legal pads, memorized footnotes in the dark, taught inmates about due process between shifts in the laundry room. And when the guards caught wind of it, they beat him, said he was inciting ideas. He stayed silent, not because he gave up, but because he was learning how the fire worked. The world outside forgot Ellis Brooks. No headlines, no protests, just another black man lost to the system. And Sarah, she went on to marry a banker, gave a TED Talk on women's safety in politics, never said a word about what really happened, never had to, because the system didn't need proof, it only needed permission. And Ellis, he was too dangerous the moment he opened his mouth with clarity, with pride, with purpose. That's what they were punishing, not a crime, but a man who refused to shrink. He served every minute, never admitted guilt, never signed the papers they begged him to sign to expedite parole, said he wouldn't trade dignity for daylight. When he walked out of prison 15 years later, there was no crowd, no reporters, just a cab driver who didn't want to pick him up. Ellis Brooks disappeared after that, but he never stopped existing. He just stopped being seen. And years later, when he showed up pushing a mop down the halls of the same kind of law school that once crucified him, nobody asked why. They just looked through him. Except one. When Ellis stepped outside those prison gates, he didn't smile. He didn't breathe deep or look up at the sky like they do in movies. He just walked, quiet, heavy, like a man who had learned to carry silence like armor. 15 years had passed, and the world had moved on without him. The city had changed. The buses were different. Stores he remembered were gone. His parents both buried while he was inside. No goodbyes, just letters returned unopened, marked deceased. His home, condemned, torn down for a parking lot. There was no place to return to, no one waiting with open arms. And worse than all of that was the sound of people looking through you. He tried, Lord knows, he tried, applied for clerk positions, office work, teaching, even offered to volunteer at a community legal center. They said they'd call him back. No one ever did. They saw the record. Didn't matter what he told them. Convicted felon said more than the truth ever could. Every door that opened had a foot waiting to kick it shut again. Ellis went back to cleaning buildings, started slow, night shifts, no questions. They liked him because he was quiet and dependable. That was all they needed, and for a while, that was all he could handle. One job led to another, and eventually, he landed at Middleton Law, the kind of place that would have once had his name on the wall. Now he was just a man who wiped fingerprints off the glass, but Ellis never stopped being who he was. He still carried a worn copy of the Constitution in his back pocket, still read court transcripts like they were scripture, every break room, every hallway, every basement closet turned into his study. He read under flickering lights, with bleach under his nails and calluses on his hands. His mind never dulled. It sharpened, hardened. He'd memorized new decisions, marked them up in secret, smuggled legal pads in his lunch box, wrote notes nobody would read, arguments no courtroom would ever hear, but to him, they mattered, because being forgotten didn't mean being erased. Still, the pain stuck around. He never spoke of it, but you could see it in the way he moved. Not slow, just careful, like every step had to be earned, like the floor beneath him could vanish if he didn't walk soft. Grief became his shadow, regret, his only company. He missed things he didn't even get to have. He missed birthdays that never came, missed seeing his father grow old, missed the courtroom he was meant to stand in, not as a defendant, but as counsel. He sometimes walked by the lecture halls and just listened from outside, never went in, never needed to. He already knew what they were teaching, knew it better than most of the people saying the words. But the pain wasn't just what he lost. It was what was taken, his name, his reputation, his purpose. They didn't just lock him away, they buried him, made sure the world would never know the version of him that could have existed. And yet, he was still here, mop in hand, back, straight, watching young minds hustle through corridors he used to dream about. Never bitter, just quiet. He learned how to survive in the cracks, never complained, never tried to prove who he used to be, because somewhere deep inside, Ellis had accepted a hard truth: some wounds don't bleed. They just sit there, like ghosts that whisper your name when the room goes quiet. But that didn't stop him, because despite everything, Ellis never stopped being a lawyer. The world might have stripped his license, but not his knowledge, not his instinct, not his purpose. Every case he read in secret, every injustice he whispered to himself in a janitor's closet, every moment he paused in front of a portrait of a man who'd once fought for people like him, it was his way of remembering. He didn't need a courtroom to practice law. He just needed someone to listen, and without even knowing it, that someone had already arrived, young, curious, watching from the corner of his eye a student named Jamal. And whether Ellis believed it or not, his voice was about to find its way back. Most people don't notice the quiet ones. Not really. They say hey, or thanks, or how you doing, but they don't look. Not in the eyes, not in the history. But Jamal was different. He looked. It started small, like most things do. A good morning here. A stay safe there. A little more eye contact. A little less rush. Ellis didn't say much at first. Just nodded, kept moving. But Jamal stuck around. Not in a pushy way. Just present. Present long enough for Ellis to finally speak back. It started over a book. Jamal was reading a Supreme Court opinion outside the lecture hall. Brown v. Board. First year stuff. Ellis passed by and paused, looked down and said, Marshall had more enemies in that courtroom than just the ones on the bench. Jamal looked up. You know this case. Ellis just gave a half smile. I live this case. After that, Jamal started sitting by the janitor's closet between classes, pretended like he was charging his phone, pretended like he wasn't trying to start something. But he was. Little by little, Ellis opened up. They talked about rulings, judges, ethics. Ellis would mention obscure precedents, cite things off memory that Jamal had to look up later just to believe they were real. He started wondering, who the hell is this man? Because this wasn't some lucky guess. Ellis knew the law. He understood it. He felt it. And it wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Calm, exact, like someone who'd been taught by fire, not textbooks. One night, late, the halls were empty. Jamal saw Ellis sitting on the stairs by the entrance, polishing the brass handrails. He walked over, sat beside him, offered half a sandwich. Ellis hesitated, then took it. They didn't speak for a while, just sat in the stillness. Then Jamal asked the question, not with force, not with suspicion, just honestly, who are you? Ellis didn't move, didn't look at him right away. He just said, You ever try to explain something to someone who already decided they don't care? Jamal nodded. Every time I walk into class, they got a small laugh from Ellis. First time Jamal had heard him laugh at all. Then he spoke, not all at once, not loudly, just piece by piece. The real story, not the one you find on Google, not that you find anything about Ellis Brooks. There, he told Jamal about Middleton Law, 1967, about being editor of the Law Review, about dreams of working civil rights cases across the South, about Sarah Winslow, about the accusation. Jamal sat still. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask if he was sure, didn't do what so many others might have done doubted. He just listened. Ellis told him about the trial, the way the prosecutor twisted his intelligence into arrogance, the way the jury wouldn't look him in the eye, the way the judge said, "You could have done great things if you knew your place," then prison, the silence, the lost years, and finally, how he ended up back here, mopping floors in a building that once promised him justice. When he finished, Ellis didn't look for pity, didn't ask for anything. He just leaned back and said, "I used to think the truth would set me free, but the truth don't mean much when nobody wants to hear it." Jamal looked at him not like a student looking at a janitor, but like a young man looking at a buried blueprint of who he could be and who the world might try to stop him from becoming. It hit him like a weight. This man sitting beside him, with cracked knuckles and calloused hands, wasn't broken. He was silenced, and Jamal knew then he couldn't let it stay that way, because Ellis Brooks wasn't just a story. He was evidence. Evidence that brilliance could be buried, that truth could be ignored, that justice, when denied, doesn't disappear, it waits, quiet, still, in the back corners of halls where no one dares to look, but Jamal had looked, and now he couldn't unsee it. Once you know the truth, it changes how you see everything. Jamal couldn't sleep, couldn't study, couldn't walk those halls without hearing Ellis's story echo in the silence. So he did what law students are trained to do. He went looking for proof. He started with court records, took a trip down to the county archive, dusty boxes, fading ink, files nobody had touched in decades. And there it was, State v. Ellis J. Brooks, 1967, yellowed, brittle pages. Testimony that read like a script written before the trial even began. No defense witnesses allowed, no physical evidence, just Sarah Winslow's word. The language in the transcript, cold, slanted, poisonous. Jamal read the prosecutor's closing statement twice, then a third time. It sounded like a sermon for execution, not a case for justice. He found the letter Ellis wrote from prison asking to reopen the case. It had been denied without explanation. He read the judge's comments, the ones that never should have left a man's mouth, let alone his bench. And Jamal felt his blood boil. He took everything he found and turned it into a piece for the law journal, not just to write up a declaration. He titled it "The Ghost in Our Halls." It was sharp, factual, grounded, but it had soul. It had pain. He turned it in, thinking maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally speak for itself. The professor returned it 2 days later, red ink across the margin, too emotional, not appropriate for publication. Jamal snapped. Too emotional? He asked. You teach us to seek justice, but when it stands right in front of you with a mop and a scar, it's too emotional. The professor didn't answer, just stared through him, like Ellis all over again. So Jamal made another choice. He brought Ellis to class, no permission, no announcement, just showed up with the man himself and said, "Y'all want to learn the law? You should meet someone who survived it." At first, nobody said a word. Ellis stood in front of the room, quiet, like he didn't belong there. But when he spoke, the silence cracked. He didn't yell, didn't blame. He just told them what happened, the charges, the trial, the years, the jobs he never got, the letters no one answered, and the way people looked through him even now, when all he ever did was try to do right. Some students squirmed. One girl cried and tried to hide it. The professor, who once called himself an expert in constitutional law, couldn't look Ellis in the eyes. When Ellis finished, the room was frozen. He didn't ask for sympathy, didn't even want it. He just said, "I gave everything I had to a system that never wanted me in it, but I'm still here. And you're gonna leave this building one day and go out there and call yourselves lawyers. So ask yourself, are you gonna be brave or are you gonna be comfortable?" That was all. He walked out. No applause. No thank you. just the weight of truth hanging in the air behind him. Within days, word spread, students started talking, whispers turned into questions, the dean got involved. The school launched a quiet internal review, more like damage control than justice, but still, something. They issued a formal apology, called it a failure of moral judgment, promised to include Ellis's story in the school's civil rights history exhibit, sent him a letter, signed, sealed, delivered, but Ellis didn't frame it, didn't post about it. He folded it, slipped it into a book on his shelf, and never mentioned it again. He didn't want headlines. He just wanted to be heard. And now finally, he had been, not by the system, not by the school, but by one young man who asked why and wouldn't let the silence win. Ellis Brooks never got his license back. No judge came forward to reverse the conviction. No big article in the New York Times. The state never said, "We were wrong." But something better happened. Jamal graduated, top of his class, passed the bar on the first try. When they called his name at the ceremony, Ellis stood in the back of the auditorium, didn't clap, didn't cheer, just smiled the way men do when they see a road they once walked finally finished under someone else's feet. Jamal didn't forget. He didn't get caught up in firms or flashy offices or chasing power. He remembered what Ellis told him on those late nights in the hallway. The law isn't meant to win arguments. It's meant to protect the people who can't yell loud enough on their own. So, Jamal started something small, a nonprofit legal clinic, one desk, one phone line, a leaky office in the south side of the city. He named it the E.J. Brooks Center for Justice. When Ellis saw the sign, he shook his head and chuckled. Naming things after ghosts now. But the truth was, he wasn't a ghost anymore. Ellis never sat in front of clients, never signed paperwork, never stepped into court again, but he was there every day, in the back room, stacks of case files beside him, teaching Jamal and his team how to read between the lines, how to speak without shouting, how to listen. That's what he said the system forgot how to do. Listen. They worked cases nobody else wanted, women evicted with no notice, men charged with things they didn't understand, families torn apart by quiet laws written in cold rooms, cases that didn't get cameras, just people, poor people, brown people, people who'd been forgotten. And Ellis, he was the compass, didn't need a title to lead, didn't need a license to teach. Jamal's team grew young lawyers, interns, students. They'd come in with fire, leave with purpose, and one by one, they started calling Ellis something he hadn't heard in decades. Sir, teacher, mentor. He'd smile, wave them off, said he was just the janitor, but everyone knew better. They called him when they were stuck, when a case felt too big or the law felt too twisted. Ellis would sit in his worn chair, rub his hands together, and ask, "What's the real question here?" He never gave answers. He gave clarity. And in that little office stuck between a barber shop and a boarded-up pawn store, justice started to grow, quietly, patiently, one case at a time. Ellis still lived in the same apartment, still rode the bus, still moved like a man who expected the world to forget him again. But they didn't, because his name was on the door now, not because of paperwork, but because of what he built with. No power, no platform, no permission, just truth. And every time Jamal walked into court, he carried Ellis with him, every closing argument, every objection, every fight for someone who couldn't fight for themselves. Ellis was there. In the rhythm, in the restraint, in the resolve, people started asking about the name. Who was E.J. Brooks? And Jamal would just smile and say, "The best lawyer I ever met." He just never got the license. Ellis didn't need the license. He had something better. He had legacy, and maybe that was the quiet justice he'd waited for all along. Not to be praised, not to be pardoned, but to be remembered, right? The janitor became the lesson. The man they tried to erase became the reason others now stand a little taller, speak a little clearer, and see what too many people missed for too long. Because in the end, Ellis Brooks didn't just mop the floors of justice. He laid the foundation for it quietly, patiently, and forever.